Hi, it's John Livesay, known as the Pitch Whisperer and author of The Successful Pitch, and you're listening to 360 Entrepreneur with Jan Ilonga.
This is episode 184, and today we talk about how to craft a pitch that seals the deal. Here we go.
Welcome to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast, the show for entrepreneurs and small business owners who dream big and want to do bigger. Join some of the world's top entrepreneurs, internet marketers, and best-selling authors as they share their inspiring stories, their struggles, and give actionable tips that will help you build, grow, and promote your online business. Here's your host, Yanni Lunga.
Hey there, how's it going? It is so crazy to think that we are approaching the 200th episode mark. I'm really am excited. I've been having a great time throughout this journey, as you can tell from my voice, and I'm really pumped about today's episode because in this one you will get advice that applies to many different parts of your business, from the way you present yourself off and online. We're going to look at what your elevator pitch should look like and how you can craft a powerful pitch that will attract potential clients and that will help you seal the deal. In this episode, we're joined by John Livesay, aka The Pitch Whisperer. The show notes for this episode, you find them over at yannilunga.com/episode 184. That's yannilunga.com/episode 184. Okay, here's the interview with John Livesay from sellingsecretsforfunding.com. This is one of the episodes I really consider a must listen. And regardless of where you are in your entrepreneurial journey, you're gonna get some valuable, and I mean valuable, golden nuggets. And joining us is a top sales expert and funding strategist who's known as the Pitch Whisperer. He has over 20 years of experience. He's a podcaster. He's the host of the Successful Pitch podcast. He does a bunch of things, and one of those is his book. So he's also an author, and he's the author of the book, The Successful Pitch, Conversations About Going From Invisible to Investable. And he's here with us. I'm so thrilled to welcome on the show, John Livesay. John, how's it going?
Good, Jan. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Pleasure is mine. And I said you're known as the Pitch Whisperer, right?
I am. That's what Inc. magazine called me.
So are we going to talk, or should we whisper, or?
Well, a horse whisperer calms people down. And what I do as the pitch whisperer is calm people down when their nerves go crazy and before they have to pitch to get funded or even pitch to get a customer. And there's 3 unspoken questions people have when they're listening to you pitch anything. And the first one is a gut thing, which is, do I trust you? Mm-hmm. And you have to make sure that people feel safe, that they trust you. It's a fight or flight response. In fact, that's where the handshake came in to play. It was showing you didn't have a weapon, right? You don't have to run away from me. And then it moves up to the heart, which is, do I like you? And the more you're able to show that you have empathy for your customers and the people you're talking to, the more people like you. Mm-hmm. And then it moves into the head, which is, will this work for me? Is this the right value? Am I going to get a return on my investment? All those questions are going on. So what I do as the Pitch Whisperer is not only help you become more confident, but get all those unspoken questions answered during your pitch.
I love it. And what I like about what you just shared with us, John, is that those principles apply obviously for pitching, as well as, I was thinking, even for a sales page, it applies.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We ask ourselves when we land on a sales page, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, you're selling yourself when you're pitching. That's the number one thing that people forget. They think, oh, people are going to give me money for my startup based on how great my idea is or my app or whatever it is. And the investors tell me time and again, we invest in the jockey, not the horse. So it's all about you and why you are the right person to execute this idea, because the idea will probably pivot. So for example, if you have 10 minutes in front of an investor to pitch them on funding you, don't waste 5 of it giving a product demonstration, because that's really not what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. I think you're so on the money, John, because I think that a product demonstration, one could even, read something or see some images and kind of get the idea. But when it comes to, as you said, to get familiar with who the jockey is, there isn't any better opportunity. So you said it, make sure if you're here with John and I, maybe you're about to pitch something, make sure to really take this advice to heart. And speaking of pitching, John, I know that something that we often hear in business, especially when starting out, is make sure to have an elevator pitch. So since you are the
yes.
pitch whisperer, what advice would you have for crafting a fantastic elevator pitch?
Well, the biggest thing is you want to answer two questions, Jan. The first one is, who do you help? And the second part of that is, what problem do you solve? So let me give you an example. I help tech CEOs struggling with their investor pitch to become irresistible so they get funded fast and their business takes off. That's an elevator pitch. That describes my company and what I do. If someone also says to me, well, who are you? I say, I'm the pitch whisperer. I help people go from invisible to investable. And the whole goal of an elevator pitch is to get people to say, that's interesting. Tell me more. You don't have to tell them everything, just enough to intrigue interest.
Yeah, I like the last thing you touched on, John, because I think that's exactly the emotion we want to trigger through our pitch or our elevator pitch is curiosity, right?
Yes. In fact, people buy emotionally and then back it up with logic. And our brain gets so used to hearing things that we tune it out. If you want to have a great elevator pitch, you have to say something that someone's never heard before. So for example, did you know that only 1% of pitches ever get funded? Imagine if there was a way to go from being invisible to being irresistible so you would be in that 1% club. Well, you don't have to imagine it because at Crack the Funding Code, that's exactly what we do. We get founders in the right room with the right pitch and they get funded and their business takes off. So again, that's another example of grabbing someone's attention, emotion. You want to go on that journey? Then this is the ride. I don't tell how we do it or the structure of it or any of that. It's just the real key is people buy transformation, not information. So make sure you're showing a before and after.
I love it. People buy transformation and not information. And I mean, again, John, I think, I couldn't agree more with what you said for the fact that nowadays, when it comes to information, there are so many possible ways to get information on almost anything nowadays. So you said people really want to see transformation and they want to be curious and imagine themselves being the ones that go through the transformation. And again, what you share with us about the elevator pitch, it's also something that can be applied to, for example, a LinkedIn profile, right?
Absolutely. You definitely should have a LinkedIn profile, especially if you're seeking funding. A lot of founders make the mistake thinking, well, I'm not looking for a job. I work for myself. I don't need a LinkedIn profile. Well, guess where investors go look to check you out, to see what your background is, and if you have any good references, or maybe you know some people in common, is your LinkedIn profile. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile, John Livesay, you'll see I'm completely branded as the author of The Successful Pitch, the host of the Successful Pitch podcast. I have references from clients who have gotten funded. I've got references from people who've been on my podcast. There's clips of me being on television. It's very robust. And that's what you need to have when you are a startup, either to get customers or to get people to join your team, but especially if you want to get people to invest in you. Let's jump back to your earlier question a minute ago, which was about the transformation. I think it would be helpful if we gave an example of that.
Yeah, sure. And before we do that, John, is it okay if in the show notes, alongside everything else we touch on, I also include a link to your LinkedIn page?
Oh, please. That would be great. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sounds good.
I also have a 2.5-minute book trailer where I give some more information out about pitching. And it also shows people how you market yourself. So I think they'll find that useful.
Awesome.
So this concept of transformation, not information, taking people on a journey. Here's the example. I tell people, I help people go from stumbling through their pitch to soaring. I help them from going from confusing investors to clarity, and I help people go from boring investors to inspiring them to join their team. So everybody can craft 3 different phrases just like that for their own business. I help people go from here to there. Right? From stumbling to soaring, from boring to inspiring, from confusing to clarity. When you have those kinds of concepts, then people are understanding the transformation that you're offering.
Yeah. And I think doing something like that also makes things a bit more clear. If I would tell you, yes, I'm a blogging expert. I mean, what does it mean? Blogging is such a wide topic. that I may be interested in a very specific aspect related to blogging, and maybe you touch on everything but that. So like you said, John, if we focus on talking about the transformation, so what we do, how we help people go from point A to point B, or go from this to that, then it's going to be definitely something more clear. And do you have something you want to add maybe on this, John?
Well, it's not just from point A to point B, it's from point A to point Z. So it has to be a dramatic transformation, right? It's not like you go from stumbling to not embarrassing yourself, right? I want to have you go from stumbling to soaring through your pitch, right? I don't want to have you just go from boring to not, mildly interesting. I want you to be inspiring. So you have to really get those contrasts.
Obviously, yeah, you're right. I mean, we want to really make sure that we help people, or the outcome of the transformation is really the cream, is really the top. And you mentioned, or you touched on one mistake entrepreneurs, startup founders make when pitching. So you talked about, sometimes they focus too much on the demonstration of the product. And I mean, shows like Shark Tank, they were probably all accustomed to kind of the pitching context, but do you have any other mistakes, John, you have seen some of your clients, or anyways other people make quite often when it comes to pitching?
Well, there's a lot, unfortunately. The first one is they don't prepare. And they think, I'm just going to wing it. And then that sounds horrible. They're so afraid of being over-prepared and sounding like a robot. But I say, if you practice enough, you can practice to be conversational. So that's the first mistake. Arthur Ashe said the key to success is confidence, and the key to confidence is preparation. You need to think of this as a Super Bowl or an Olympic moment, right? Those people rehearse and practice before they get in front of cameras if you're an actor, or before you get played the big game or the Olympic moment. So you need to practice. These are the Super Bowl of meetings. That would be really important. The second mistake I see when people pitch is saying they don't have any competition. And then the investors think, well, then there's no market.
Right, exactly.
And then the other one is not being coachable. Because investors not only want to give you money, but they want to know that you'll take advice from them and let them build the company with you. So if you come across as a know-it-all or arrogant, you're definitely going to get a no. So avoid those three mistakes for sure.
Love it. So you heard it. Preparation, no competition or lack of competition, and not being coachable. Those are all areas you really want to make sure that you take care of before you go about pitching. And John, something that I know you also talk about and ties into the whole pitching story we're sharing here is storytelling. So do you have any advice on, actually, maybe before I ask you about the advice, it would be good to ask you, why would you say storytelling is a critical element for any businessman or businesswoman?
Well, Jan, I like to quote Plato on that. He said, storytellers rule the world. So if you want to be a master storyteller, that's really the key to success, because every business needs sales, and people buy emotionally the right brain, which is where imagination lives. But if you only talk about how something works in numbers and left brain stuff, that will never get a sale. You need to tell a story to be memorable and to get people emotionally engaged so that they want to take action, and then back it up with logic.
I love it. Thank you so much. So you heard it. Storytelling is for ruling the world. And we had an episode in the past with Christoph Trapp where we talked about storytelling more in depth. So you can definitely check out that alongside everything else John and I are talking about in the show notes. And if we stick to storytelling for a moment, John, do you have any advice? I mean, some of the things you have shared here with us are already useful also for storytelling, but do you have any advice on, how to start embracing storytelling to drive sales?
Yes. Well, first of all, you need to have your story of origin ready to go. In other words, how did you come up with the name for your company? What motivated you? Why are you so passionate about this besides making money?
Right.
That's a great story to get customers as well as investors, because they need to know what your why behind your why is. Then there's different storytelling genres. So you have to figure out, what's my genre? For example, there's the rags to riches, which is this, in the movie world, that's the Cinderella story. But Johnny Walker Scotch uses that, where they talk about poor Johnny Walker Scotch farmer, and now he's Johnny Walker. Then there's the quest genre, which is Lord of the Rings movie. And Lexus has a tagline saying their pursuit of perfection, right? They're on a journey. And then there's a genre about rebirth. There's a movie, It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart at Christmas time. And then Prudential says, retirement's not the end. It's your third act. It's your rebirth. So figure out what story genre your company is and then craft that story. And during that story, there should be 3 steps. There should be a problem, some kind of obstacle to overcome, and then a solution, and then what happens after that solution happens. When you tell that story of a potential customer that you've helped by giving a case study through storytelling, other people put themselves in the story and want to go on the journey with you.
Very powerful, John, what you share with us. And again, what I think is great about the conversation we're having is that those are things that can be applied in many areas of our business. I mean, whether it's when we meet somebody face to face, or is it on a sales page, or is it on, as we said, a LinkedIn profile or something like that. So you heard it, you have to work on storytelling. You really have to master storytelling. And if you're starting out, it's okay. I mean, it is a process, right, John?
Oh, yes. Nobody becomes excellent at anything, whether it's storytelling or driving a car, riding a bike the first time out. You have to practice and get some coaching. Don't go it alone. That's my big take on it.
Yeah. Okay, John, now I want to ask you to tell us more about something you do that has to do with storytelling, which is your podcast. So you're the host of the Successful Pitch podcast. So, John, can you tell us a little bit more about what your show is about and kind of what we can expect by tuning in episode after episode?
Sure. Well, what's an interesting story about that is why I started the podcast in the first place, was I had clients coming to me saying, yes, I definitely need help with my pitch to get funded, but I also need introductions to investors. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. I don't know any investors. So I thought, well, what if I start a podcast and start interviewing investors from around the world who would share with me what they look for when they hear a pitch? Not only will I be able to help people craft a better pitch, but then I can make the intros to help them get funded. And my second guest turned out to be Judy Robinette, the author of How to Be a Power Connector. And she started sending me clients, and then they got great results. So she said, let's go into business together. And we started Crack the Funding Code from there. So when you come to the Successful Pitch podcast, you'll hear from investors who share their criteria on how they decide which pitch to fund. And more importantly, you'll also hear stories of successful entrepreneurs who've gotten funded and how they did it.
Okay, so we get an overview of the pitching scene from both sides of the coin, really.
Exactly.
Okay, love it. So again, a reminder, if you're here with John and I, you have heard me saying this in the past episodes, everything we are covering here is going to be linked to in the show notes, including the Successful Pitch podcast. And I said early on, John, in the intro that you're also an author. So you're the author of the book, The Successful Pitch, Conversations about Going from Invisible to Investable. And I think after these few minutes that we've been chatting here and after reading the title, I think that people can kind of get an idea of what the book is about. But still, can you take a moment to tell us maybe why you decided to write the book, number one, and number two, what we can expect from it?
Yes. Well, I wanted to give people 10 of my best podcasts in one easy place to find. I've interviewed over 90 investors, so I pulled 10 of my favorite episodes and put them in this book. But I also give some stories of people we've helped getting funded so that they can realize, oh, I know now how to ask for what I want and get a yes. That's the real core takeaway that you get from the Successful Pitch book.
Okay, so now you really have no excuse not to take action and not to kind of craft your pitching skills, because, I mean, you're getting the advice right here. There is the Successful Pitch podcast. There is the book, and then there is also LinkedIn where you can connect with John. And last but not least, there is also John's site, sellingsecretsforfunding.com. So you really have different ways to learn from John Livesay. And John, I want to ask you, if you have any advice for all of us for kind of going from invisible to investable. I mean, again, some things I think you already touched on, but is there something else?
Sure. I think the big thing is realize it's rungs on a ladder, much like dating, right? First, the bottom rung is invisible. Nobody sees you. Then the next rung up is insignificant. And in the dating world, that's not much better. Then you become interesting. right? And that's where we start to work with people who already have a team and somewhat of an idea in place, maybe a minimal viable product. And we get you from interesting to the next rung of the ladder, which is intriguing, 75%, to really being irresistible / investable, because we get people multiple offers from multiple investors, and then we help you negotiate what is the best offer to get from. So just realize that you need to have a strategy in place and you need to get some help. And if your listeners want to download the free PDF of the mistakes to avoid when pitching, they can just go to sellingsecretsforfunding.com/fire, and I'll email that to them.
Perfect. So you heard it. There is also that is also going to be there in the show notes. So make sure to go to the show notes of this episode to get the links to every single thing John, Livesay, and I are talking about here. And John, this has been a great conversation. And we mentioned your LinkedIn, your website. If somebody has questions or would simply like to thank you or connect with you, what would you say is the best way to do that? Is it through LinkedIn?
You could do that, or you can also send me a direct message on Twitter. My Twitter account is @John_Livesay.
Oh, okay, perfect. So that's JOHN_LIVESAY. So @John_Livesay. And John, you have really shared a lot of value here with us. You have talked about the ingredients to increase confidence. We've talked about the elevator pitch, pitching mistakes, the importance of storytelling, and why we should use storytelling also when it comes to our sales, how it can help us. And now you told us more about your podcast, about the book, and now you share advice for going from invisible to investable. And to wrap it up, do you have any final advice, any final words of wisdom for everybody here?
Yes, I like to quote someone from the book, Jay Sammet, who said, "Failure is just feedback. Keep going until you get a zombie idea so great it won't die."
Man, I love it. Powerful word to wrap up the interview here. And I mean, John, you're showing us that you really are a master at communication. And I want to say really thank you so much, first and foremost, for what you do for helping entrepreneurs, for helping really people who have big dreams, who really want to take action, who really want to take their career and life to the next step. And thank you for being here and sharing your expertise. I really, really am grateful.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You're a charming host.
And we are back, John. Thank you so much for sharing your Pitch Whisperer advice here on the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. And you heard it. There are many different ways you can learn more about pitching. You can learn from John. And one of those is the PDF on mistakes to absolutely avoid when pitching. If you want to find the link to that resource or any other thing John and I have talked about throughout our interview, make sure to check out the show notes page for today's episode over at yanilunga.com/184. This is it for today. This is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining John Livesay and I in this new episode of the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. In case you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite app so that you don't miss any episode.
Thank you for listening to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. For more tips and tools, head over to www.yanilunga.com.